The air inside the Berlin bunker was stale, heavy with the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint whir of servers working deep in the walls. Screens filled the room with the cold glow of maps and coded reports. Daniel Cole sat in a straight-back chair at the long metal table, his posture rigid even after 12 hours. His face, sharp with exhaustion, showed no cracks. Years in covert operations had trained him to survive silence as much as gunfire. Across from him stood Mason, his handler. Tall, clean-shaven, a man who carried calm like a weapon. Mason never raised his voice. He didn't need to. The console at his side chirped. Mason tapped the receiver, eyes flicking to Daniel. "Patch it through." His tone suggested routine, but Daniel knew Mason well enough to catch the brief shift in his jaw, a flicker of tension. A woman's voice spilled into the room, shaky, hurried. "Mr. Cole? This is Mrs. Turner, Lily's teacher. I'm so sorry, but your daughter's in the infirmary. There's a cut on her head. It's bleeding heavily." The words landed like live wires. Daniel straightened instantly, pulse spiking beneath his composed frame. For a man who had weathered crossfire and explosions, it was strange how one phone call could feel more lethal than a battlefield. Then another voice came through, softer, broken by sobs. His daughter. "Dad, she pushed me. My stepmom. She said my real mom was weak." Daniel's knuckles went white around the table edge. Lily was only 10. Too young to understand the wars adults carried inside them. Too young to defend herself against the bitterness of another woman. Elena. Elegant, composed Elena. The wife Daniel had convinced himself would bring stability after Claire's death. She was supposed to protect Lily, not wound her. Daniel's chest burned as if the concrete walls had shrunk around him. The line went silent for half a beat. Mason stepped closer, his voice lowering until it cut like a blade. "Burn your papers. The plane is waiting. Go fix this." There was no hesitation. Daniel unclipped his ID badge, tossed it on the table, and rose in one motion. His chair scraped back, metal legs grinding against the floor. His eyes didn't leave the door. Inside his ribcage, years of discipline fought with something primal. He had been trained to wait, to watch, to measure. But this wasn't about strategy, or intel, or borders on a map. This was about Lily. The bunker buzz faded into the background. He heard only the memory of Claire's voice, soft but unwavering, spoken in a hospital bed years ago. "Promise me you'll protect her. No matter what." Daniel grabbed his coat from the back of the chair and headed for the corridor, footsteps echoing against steel walls. Mason didn't follow, but his words chased him down the hall. "Remember, fix it, don't break it." The jet waiting on the tarmac was already fueled, its engines thrumming like a pulse. Berlin disappeared behind him in a rush of cold wind as he mounted the stairs. Inside the cabin, he sank into leather and let his hands shake for the first time in years. Lily's voice replayed in his head. Every pause, every sob, the crack when she said, "Mom was weak." That phrase wasn't random. It was chosen, weaponized. And Daniel knew, in the marrow of his bones, that this was no accident. Somewhere thousands of miles away, his daughter was lying in a school infirmary, bleeding and betrayed. And the woman he had trusted to care for her stood accused by the only voice he could never ignore. The jet lifted into the night sky. Berlin lights blurred into a smear of gold and black, then vanished under clouds. Daniel closed his eyes, jaw locked. He wasn't flying home as a soldier, or an operative, or a ghost hidden in the cracks of world politics. He was flying home as a father. And a father does not negotiate when his child is bleeding. The jet hummed like a steady heartbeat, the cabin washed in low amber light. Daniel sat alone, shoulders squared against the window, watching the night carve a thin silver seam along the wing. He let his hands rest on his knees and forced them to be still. Years of training had taught him how to quiet a body. Tonight it felt like he was trying to quiet a storm. He replayed Lily's voice, the hiccuping sob, the way she swallowed the word weak as if it tasted like metal. That wasn't a child's word. It was something an adult put in her mouth on purpose. Elena's voice followed in his mind, careful and smoothed at the edges. She tripped. She lies when she's emotional. When had that phrase started? He traced it back. 2 months ago, after parent night, Elena had used the same line about a spilled glass of juice. He'd let it pass. His phone vibrated on the tray. A text from Mrs. Turner. Paramedics suggest scans. She's lucid but dizzy. Small laceration, possible concussion. I'll ride with her until family arrives. Relief, measured and brief, moved through him. He typed back, "Thank you. If Elena insists on discharge, ask the attending to note the child's statement in full. I'm 28 minutes out from wheels down." He hovered, added, "Please keep Lily where she feels safe." 3 dots appeared, then, understood. Another buzz. "Elena, she fell. I told the school. They overreact. Come home and don't embarrass us. No photo, no details, no how fast can you get here." He stared at the message's smooth surface and pictured the kitchen at home. White counters, a fruit bowl without fruit. Order as performance. He let his gaze unfocus. Claire's laugh arrived, uninvited. The soft, surprise kind, like she hadn't planned to be that happy. "Hospitals smell like lemons and ghosts," she used to say during the chemo months, and somehow she made it a joke. "Promise me you'll protect her," she'd whispered when the treatments stopped working. He had promised with his hand on her wrist, feeling the bird-bone lightness under his palm. He'd kept that promise in pieces, birthdays by video call, bedtime stories from hotel rooms, gifts wrapped by assistants. Protection wasn't presence. He felt the difference now, like a bruise. He opened notes and started a list, the way he would for any operation. ER photographs of injury, notes size and location of laceration. Child spontaneous statement recorded by neutral adult. Teacher witness narrative. Attending physician's impression. Fall versus push, height of impact point. Home scene, desk height, corner shape, any transfer blood. Elena's timeline from morning to incident. Secure Lily's clothing if possible. The list steadied him. He added one more item and drew a square around it. Stay human. It was something Mason had said years ago after a rescue went clean but left Daniel hollow. Fix it, don't break it. As if conjured, Mason's name flashed. Daniel answered. Status. Plane on time, he said. Lily's headed for scans. A pause. When Mason spoke again, his words were clipped. One more development. County Child Services received an anonymous call tonight. Caller claims you're volatile, absent, and that Elena and Lily are unsafe when you return. They used your full name and employment history. I slid along Daniel's spine. From where? Block number, voice masked. The report is logged. They may send a social worker to the hospital if flagged. Let them, he said, keeping his voice low. They'll find facts. Facts need witnesses, Mason said. I've engaged a family attorney to be on standby. No off-book solutions. I'm not going off-book, Daniel said. Not for this. The plane dipped slightly, beginning its slow descent. City lights gathered like constellations stitched to the dark. He typed a message to Elena and didn't send it. He had learned long ago that the first instinct to force clarity is often how you lose it. He needed her unprompted words, her baseline story, not a coach version shaped by his anger. He thought of Elena the first time she'd tucked Lily into bed, stiff at the edges, as if careful not to crease a page. Later, she had stood too long staring at the framed photo of Claire on Lily's dresser, eyes glassy in the low hall light. Maybe the photo belongs in the living room, she had suggested, smiling in that practiced way. He'd said nothing then. He should have said something then. A small silence had invited a larger one. The captain's voice rolled through the cabin, gentle and indifferent. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been cleared to land. Weather is calm. Estimated time to touchdown, 13 minutes. 13 minutes. Daniel flexed his hands once released. His phone vibrated again. Mrs. Turner called this time. He answered before the second ring. Her whisper carried hospital echo. Mr. Cole, Elena is here. She's insisting Lily come home. The attending wants to keep her for observation, but... In the background, Elena's voice, low but edged. We are leaving now. This is my child too. Daniel's pulse jumped. Put the doctor on speaker, he said. I'm almost there. Footsteps, a shuffle, then a new voice measured. Mr. Cole, Dr. Sue. Given the mechanism of injury in the child's report, I recommend observation overnight. I will document if the guardian removes her against medical advice. Thank you, Daniel said. Please keep her until I arrive. I consent to observation. Elena's voice cut in again, closer to the phone, sugary and sharp. Daniel, don't dramatize. She tripped. You always turn work stress into paranoia. He looked at the black window as runway lights rose to meet him, a ladder out of the dark. He answered evenly, I'll see you in 13, and ended the call before she could answer. The wing flared. Tires kissed tarmac with a muted thud. For the first time all night, he let himself breathe all the way down. The mission wasn't to prove a point. It was to protect a child, and to protect the truth from anyone who preferred a prettier story. The emergency department smelled of antiseptic and faint coffee, a sterile brightness that clashed with the weight pressing on Daniel's chest. Automatic doors slid open, releasing him into the rush of nurses and clipped voices. He spotted Mrs. Turner near the desk, her hand hovering protectively over Lily, who sat on a gurney with gauze taped across her temple. The stuffed rabbit was tucked under one arm, its ear damp from tears. Daniel's stride lengthened. Lily, her head snapped up. Relief, raw and unfiltered, broke across her bruised face. She tried to rise, but Mrs. Turner guided her gently back onto the pillow. Easy, sweetheart. Dad's here now. Daniel reached her side, kneeling so his eyes met hers. His voice cracked despite himself. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Lily's fingers clutched his sleeve, knuckles white. She pushed me, Dad. I said I wanted Mom's picture in my room, and she shoved me. The words tumbled out like marbles spilling from a jar, urgent and desperate to be believed. He cupped her hand with both of his, forcing calm into his voice. I hear you. I believe you. Inside, rage surged like a tide he could barely dam. A sharp click of heels announced Elena. She entered with the polished composure of someone used to turning eyes. Her blazer was crisp, hair perfectly coiled at the nape of her neck. But Daniel saw the tension in her posture, the tightness at the corner of her mouth. Daniel, she began smoothly, as if this were a misunderstanding between dinner guests. She tripped. She's always dramatic. I told the school already. Mrs. Turner straightened, lips pressed thin. That's not what happened. She said you pushed her into the desk. Elena's eyes flicked to the teacher, a subtle flare of irritation before she turned back to Daniel. You know how children can be. Still grieving, still blaming me. Her smile was gentle, practiced. Daniel studied her face. Outward calm, but her fingers kept circling her wedding band, twisting it again and again. His training cataloged every detail. The faint smudge of makeup under her left eye, the way her throat worked harder to swallow. The attending physician, Dr. Sue, entered, holding a chart. The laceration required 6 stitches. CT is clear, no intracranial bleeding. However, I like to keep her overnight for observation. He looked directly at Daniel, then at Elena. That's standard protocol, given the child's statement. Elena's tone sharpened. Unnecessary. She's fine. I'll take her home. Daniel rose slowly, placing himself between Elena and the bed. His voice stayed low, even the way it always did in a briefing before a dangerous move. She's staying. That's not a discussion. For a moment, the facade cracked. Elena's eyes hardened, and something cold flashed through them before she smoothed it away. You're letting your job paranoia bleed into family life again, she whispered, almost tenderly, but the words sliced. Lily whimpered, shrinking against Mrs. Turner. Daniel felt his own breath tighten. This isn't paranoia. It's my daughter's blood on a desk corner. Silence pulsed in the room. Then Elena sighed, stepping back as though conceding, though her eyes lingered on Lily with a look Daniel couldn't quite name. Resentment, maybe, or fear. Dr. Sue nodded curtly. She'll be monitored here tonight. He scribbled on the chart and left. Daniel turned back to his daughter. He brushed a stray curl from her forehead, careful not to touch the bandage. Rest now. I'll be right here. Her grip on his sleeve loosened slightly, trust settling in. But even as her eyes fluttered closed, the echo of her words haunted him. She said Mom was weak. Claire had never been weak. Through every chemo round, Every night of fevers, she had met fear head-on. For Elena to use that word, it wasn't random. It was deliberate. Daniel stayed by Lily's side as the hospital quieted into its midnight rhythm. Elena sat in the corner, legs crossed, scrolling her phone with an air of control. Mrs. Turner eventually left with a soft promise to check in tomorrow. Under the fluorescent buzz, Daniel kept still, but his mind worked like clock gears grinding. Something in Elena's story didn't just feel false, it felt rehearsed. And behind her polished mask, he caught the faintest tremor in her hands, as if she knew more than she dared to say. In the dim glow of the monitor, Daniel's eyes never left Elena's reflection in the glass panel of the door. For the first time, he understood. This wasn't just about one shove. Something larger was moving beneath the surface. And he would find it. The hospital thinned into whispers after midnight. Rubber saws, distant monitors, the soft click of doors. Daniel sat in the chair beside Lily's bed, elbows on his knees, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest. The stitched line above her temple was a neat, infuriating seam. Elena's reflection hovered in the window glass like a second presence, legs crossed, phone turned face down on her thigh. A nurse adjusted the drip and smiled at Lily's rabbit. "We'll move her to pediatrics soon," she murmured. "Quieter there." When the door sighed shut, Elena shifted. "We need to present a united front," she said softly, as if they were discussing a school fundraiser. "If you show up accusing me in front of staff, you'll make it worse for her." Daniel didn't look away from Lily. "Tell me exactly how she fell." Elena exhaled, patient. She slipped, reaching for her backpack. "Hit the desk corner." It was fast. "Which corner?" he asked. "Left front or right?" "She's right-hand dominant. The bruise pattern doesn't match a forward fall." Her smile tightened. "You're interrogating me." "That's your problem, Daniel. You interrogate where you should trust." He finally turned. "Trust is built on what's true." His voice stayed level, but the air between them grew brittle. The phone on his belt buzzed. "Mason." Daniel stood and stepped into the hall. Cold light bleached the corridor. A vending machine hummed like an insect. "Go," Daniel said, keeping his tone low. "Two things," Mason replied. "Anonymous CPS report logged at 2118. Alleges you're volatile and that Elena fears your return. Also, a flag on a messaging string we monitor in your region. Phrases match what Lily reported. Weak mother appears verbatim. Sender masked, recipient pinged off your residential IP within the last week." Daniel's jaw set. "So the poison started before tonight." "Looks that way," Mason said. "This isn't random temper. It's narrative. You know how narratives are built?" "I do." He pictured Elena's phone face down, the way her thumb kept tracing the edge like it might cut her. "I'm not solving this off book. I engaged a family attorney on standby," Mason said. "Document everything. Fix it, don't break it." Daniel killed the call and stood a moment longer, watching dust glow in the corridor's fluorescent wash. He remembered the study at home. Clean lines, a desk with a shallow side drawer that never quite sat flush. Last month he'd reached for a charging cable and found a second charger coiled behind the printer, not the braided white one Elena preferred, but a slim black lead tucked just out of sight. He thought nothing of it. He thought about it now. Back in the room, Elena had moved closer to the bed, hand hovering over Lily's blanket like a benediction that never landed. "I'm taking her home in the morning," she said without looking up. "Hospitals make her anxious." "The doctor will set the discharge," Daniel answered. "We follow medical advice. She needs normalcy." Elena's voice softened on the word. "You flying in like a storm is not normal." The nurse returned with a chart. "We've got a room in pediatrics," she said. "One parent can stay. We have cots." "I'll stay," Elena said quickly. "I'll stay," Daniel said at the same time. The nurse glanced between them. Elena turned, expression smooth. "You have work, and Lily trusts routines." Daniel nodded at the nurse. "Can we both go up for the transfer? I'll step out afterward to bring clothes and her pillow from home." He looked at Elena. "You can stay with her while I'm gone." A bead of calculation crossed Elena's face. Too fast for most eyes, not for his. "Fine," she said. They moved as a small procession, Nurse Gurney, Mrs. Turner's donated tote of crayons, and a puzzle book, Daniel at the foot, Elena at the head. In the elevator, Lily stirred, blinking. Daniel squeezed her hand. "New room," he whispered. "Quieter." Pediatrics was painted in pastels that felt like someone's guess at comfort. The nurse settled Lily, checked vitals, dimmed the lights. "Was if you need anything." When they were alone again, Elena spoke without turning. "If you go home, bring her yellow blanket. It's at the end of the bed." She paused. "And my blue scarf. It gets cold in here." Daniel studied the back of her head, the careful coil of hair, the steady shoulders. "I'll bring the blanket," he said. "She won't need your scarf." Elena faced him then, and for a heartbeat the mask dipped. Fear flickered, quick as a blink. "Don't make this a war." "It already is," he said quietly, "but not the kind you think." He leaned to Lily, brushed the air above her temple instead of touching the bandage. "I'll be back soon," he murmured. Her fingers tightened around his for a second, then loosened. In the corridor, he texted Mason, leaving hospital to collect clothing and document home scene. "Keep counsel warm." The reply came within seconds. "Copy. Record everything." He slid the phone away and walked toward the night exit. Badge lanyards and fluorescent hums replaced by the scrape of his shoes on polished tile. Outside, the air was sharp, the parking lot pools of sodium light and shadow. He paused with his hand on the car door, knowing what waited. A pristine living room that had always looked like a stage photograph, a study that smelled faintly of citrus oil and paper, a drawer that didn't sit flush, a coil of cable tucked where no one would see it unless they were looking for it. He turned the key. The engine woke. He checked the rear view, catching his own eyes, the same eyes that had watched borders shift on screens in Berlin, now fixed on a single line. Home. The house greeted him like a stranger. The porch light glowed steady, the curtains drawn neat, not a line out of place. Daniel unlocked the door and stepped into silence. The air inside smelled faintly of citrus polish, as if someone had wiped the surfaces for show rather than use. He paused in the entryway, letting his eyes adjust. Every detail felt rehearsed. The throw pillows aligned, the fruit bowl on the counter gleaming but empty. He set Lily's overnight bag on the couch, then moved deeper into the living room. His footsteps sounded too loud, bouncing off the polished wood floors. He scanned quickly. No overturned chairs, no sign of struggle, nothing to match the chaos that still echoed in his daughter's voice. Instead, everything looked curated, like a magazine spread, sterile and soulless. He made his way toward the study. The door opened with a soft creak, revealing the same order as the rest of the house. Books lined in color-coded rows, desk spotless, paper stacked to exact edges. Yet Daniel's eyes landed immediately on the shallow side drawer that never sat flush. He remembered noticing it weeks ago, dismissing it as cheap carpentry. Now it felt like a locked mouth, refusing to speak. He crouched, pulling gently at the drawer. It stuck, locked. His gaze shifted to the pencil cup. Paperclips bent, a faint mark where someone had worried metal into shape. He picked one out, straightened it, and worked at the lock. Years of field improvisation steadied his hands. After a minute, the drawer clicked open. Inside lay a slim phone, screen dark. Not Elena's regular device. This one was plain, utilitarian, the kind bought for cash. Daniel powered it on. No password. The home screen lit up with threads of messages. His chest tightened as he read. Make her hate him. Use the mother. Call Claire weak. Push, don't break. Bruises teach memory. He will lose credibility. Keep pressure. The sender was saved as M. His stomach knotted. He scrolled further. Screenshots of small bank transfers. Notes of times when Lily was most alone. Reminders of stories to repeat. The words were cold, clinical. This wasn't an accident. This was a campaign. He set the phone down carefully, like it might burn through the desk. His breathing slowed into the kind of stillness he only felt before a breach. Daniel searched the rest of the drawer. Receipts, one passport copy, and a folded paper tucked beneath. It was an email printout, edges creased. We both know how you got that visa extension. Cooperate or I talk. The world tilted. Elena. Her polished exterior, her constant composure. It had never been about control. It had been fear. She had been cornered, pushed to act under threat. That didn't excuse the shove, the bruise on Lily's shoulder, but it reframed it. Someone else had her on a leash. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out. Mason again. Status: I found a secondary device, Daniel said quietly, scanning the glowing screen again. Messages instructing Elena to break Lily, to make her believe Claire was weak. This isn't just domestic tension. It's deliberate. Mason was silent for a moment. Then, do you know who? Initialed M, Daniel said. Bank trails. I'll dig. You dig too deep tonight. You risk exposure, Mason warned. Get evidence, not just suspicion. Daniel closed the drawer softly, pocketed the phone. I've got enough to know Lily's not safe until this is finished. He stood in the center of the study, surrounded by walls too perfect to be honest. The hum of the refrigerator down the hall was the only sound. He pictured Lily in her hospital bed, fingers curled around that rabbit, whispering she said Mom was weak. His promise to Claire thundered back. Protect her, no matter what. Daniel left the study and walked into the master bedroom. At the foot of the bed, folded precisely, lay the yellow blanket Lily loved. He picked it up, pressing it to his chest for a moment before tucking it under his arm. On the dresser, a blue scarf sat neatly, as Elena had requested. He stared at it, but didn't reach. When he stepped back into the night, the house behind him looked untouched, but his world had shifted. Someone had orchestrated this, feeding Elena poison and expecting her to deliver it to Lily. Elena was guilty, yes, but she was also caught. And now Daniel had a trail, one that pointed to a shadow he hadn't yet named. He locked the door and walked to the car, the yellow blanket safe in the seat beside him. As the engine rumbled to life, he glanced once more at the dark windows. He didn't see home anymore. He saw a stage, and someone else was writing the script. And Daniel was done letting anyone else direct his story. The drive back to the hospital was silent, except for the low hum of the tires. The yellow blanket rested on the passenger seat, its edges soft and worn from years of use. Daniel's hand brushed it once, grounding himself. He could still hear Lily's voice, trembling as she said, "She called my real mom weak." It wasn't just cruelty, it was scripting. Someone wanted those words in Lily's mouth. The burner phone sat in his jacket pocket, heavy with meaning. Each vibration of the car felt like a reminder. This wasn't an accident, and Elena wasn't acting alone. He pulled into the hospital lot, the sodium lights casting long shadows across the asphalt. As he killed the engine, his phone buzzed. A new message on the burner. He pulled it out and swiped. M, keep the story consistent. She fell. No deviation. He will break if you stay silent. Daniel's pulse slowed, the way it always did before contact. Whoever it was, they weren't guessing. They knew his movements, his patterns, the rhythm of his suspicion. That made them close. Too close. Inside, pediatrics smelled of crayon wax and disinfectant. Lily was asleep, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. A monitor beeped gently beside her. Elena sat on the cot, scarf wrapped around her shoulders, posture upright but tired. Her eyes flicked to the blanket in his hands, then back to his face. "You found it," she said. Her voice was calm, almost relieved. "I did," he replied, draping the blanket over Lily with slow care. "She'll rest better now." Elena studied him. "You're watching me like I'm the enemy." "You shoved her," Daniel said plainly. His words hung heavy in the pastel room. Her lips pressed thin. I panicked. She was shouting, and she stopped, eyes wet for the first time, then steadied herself. "You think I wanted to hurt her?" "I think someone told you to," Daniel answered. He pulled the burner from his pocket and placed it on the small table between them. The screen lit, displaying the last message. M, keep the story consistent. Who are they? Elena's face drained of color. Her hand reached instinctively, then froze midair. "You went through my things." "I went through what was poisoning my daughter," he corrected. "Tell me who M is." Her throat worked, jaw tight. For the first time, the polish cracked into fear. "You don't understand. They'll ruin me. They'll ruin us." Daniel leaned in, his voice low but firm. "I don't care about us. I care about Lily. You think protecting secrets will save you? It won't. It'll destroy her." Elena's hands trembled. She looked at Lily, the rise and fall of her chest steady under the yellow blanket. Something shifted in her expression: guilt, conflict, exhaustion. But when she spoke, her voice was almost a whisper. "I can't." Before Daniel could press, the door opened. Dr. Sue entered, flipping through Lily's chart. Vitals stable. She should be fine with observation. "I'll check again in the morning." His eyes lingered on Elena, then Daniel, sensing the static between them. He nodded once and left. Daniel sat back, the burner phone still glowing faintly. He recognized the pattern. When fear outweighs truth, silence becomes survival. Elena wasn't going to talk yet, but her fear told him more than she realized. Later, when the ward quieted and Elena finally dozed in the chair, Daniel slipped out into the hall. He dialed Mason. "I've got leverage," he said. "She's hiding behind fear. Someone has her pinned." "Any identifiers on him?" Mason asked. "Not yet. But the language. They know Claire. They're using her memory. This is personal." A pause. "Claire's family?" Mason asked carefully. Daniel's grip on the phone tightened. He hadn't thought it, but now the pieces trembled toward place. "Margaret, Claire's sister. The one who had said at the funeral, 'You stole her life for your missions.' The one who had vanished from their orbit soon after." Daniel exhaled. "I'll confirm." Mason's tone sharpened. "Careful. Personal ties cut deepest." The call ended. Daniel leaned against the sterile wall, eyes closed. The trail was clearer now. Elena wasn't the architect, just a pawn cornered into cruelty. And the true puppeteer? It had to be someone with a wound sharp enough to twist love into vengeance. When he returned to the room, Lily stirred, mumbling in her sleep. Daniel brushed her hair back gently. His jaw tightened with resolve. Whoever was, they had crossed a line. And Daniel wasn't flying back to Berlin until he erased every shadow from Lily's life. Morning filtered into the pediatric ward through narrow blinds, thin stripes of pale light cutting across the room. Lily stirred beneath the yellow blanket, her face still soft with sleep. Daniel sat in the chair beside her, his posture straight despite the fatigue pressing on his shoulders. He had not slept. He had only watched, cataloging every flicker of Elena's expression across the night. The quiet was broken by a polite knock. A woman in a navy blazer stepped in, clipboard pressed against her chest. Her badge swung slightly as she closed the door behind her. "Good morning. I'm Sandra Green with County Child Services. We received a report and need to follow up." Elena's head jerked up from the cot, eyes flashing panic. "What report?" Sandra offered a practice smile. "An anonymous call last night. Allegations of volatility in the home. Concerns about emotional safety. It's standard that we interview the child and parents." Daniel's jaw tightened. He had been warned. Mason's voice echoed in his mind. Anonymous CPS report logged. They may send a social worker. And here she was. Lily's eyes fluttered open, confused. She clutched her rabbit, gaze darting between the stranger and her father. "Dad." Daniel leaned close, voice low and steady. "It's okay. Just answer truthfully." He looked at Sandra. "I'll be present." Sandra nodded. "Of course." "Lily, can you tell me what happened yesterday?" Lily's lips trembled. She glanced at Elena, who tried to smile, but the tension in her jaw betrayed her. Slowly, Lily whispered, "She pushed me. She said my mom was weak." Her voice cracked, and she buried her face in the rabbit's fur. Sandra scribbled note. "Thank you, sweetheart." She turned to Daniel. "And you, sir, how do you typically handle stress at home?" The question was deliberate, probing. Daniel met her gaze without flinching. "By being absent mostly, that's my failure. I travel for work more than I should, but I have never harmed my daughter. My priority now is ensuring she feels safe and heard." Sandra's pen paused midline. His candor seemed to surprise her. "And Mrs. Cole?" Elena shifted uncomfortably. "I love Lily. She exaggerates when she's upset. It was an accident." Daniel reached into his jacket and placed the burner phone on the table. The screen still showed the chilling threads of instruction. "This was hidden in our home. It contains messages telling her to hurt my daughter, to twist her memory of her mother. Elena has been under pressure. She made a choice she can't take back, but she wasn't alone in it." Elena's face drained of color. Her lips parted as if to protest, but no sound came. Sandra's eyes narrowed as she studied the screen. I'll need to log this evidence. Mr. Cole, may I? Daniel handed it over. Please. Sandra straightened. Given the injury, the child's disclosure, and the documented evidence, Lily will remain under protective observation. Custody arrangements will be reviewed. I'll also file for supervised visitation until the investigation concludes. Elena's composure shattered. This is insane. You're destroying our family with paranoia. Daniel didn't raise his voice. Our family was already being destroyed. I'm trying to stop it. Sandra closed her folder. I'll return later with next steps. For now, Mr. Cole, you stay with your daughter. Mrs. Cole, I'll need you to step outside while I complete the formal notes. Elena froze, then slowly rose, every movement stiff with suppressed rage. She glanced at Lily, just once, quickly, as though afraid to look too long. Then she left, heels striking the tile like gunshots. The door clicked shut. The room exhaled. Lily clung to Daniel's arm, whispering, "Don't let them take me." He wrapped the yellow blanket tighter around her. They won't. Not while I'm here. But as he held her, Daniel knew this wasn't over. The anonymous caller had achieved their goal. Authorities were now woven into their lives. The fight wasn't just about proving Elena's actions anymore. It was about exposing the hand that had guided her. And Daniel was beginning to see the shape of that hand in his memory. Margaret's voice, sharp at Claire's funeral, accusing him of stealing her sister away. The shadow was no longer faceless. It was family, and it was coming closer. The cafeteria smelled of burnt coffee and scrambled eggs gone rubbery. Daniel sat alone at a corner table, his hands wrapped around a paper cup that had long since cooled. The morning rush of nurses and orderlies blurred around him, but his focus was on the slim phone spread open before him. The burner. Its screen glowed with the chilling threads of instruction, each message like a blade. He scrolled back, combing for anything that might pierce the mask of M. Times, dates, transfers. One thread contained photos, blurred receipts for money sent in neat, calculated amounts. A florist, a tutoring center, a nondescript P.O. box. He frowned. Payments were too small for blackmail. They looked more like breadcrumbs, designed to hide in plain sight. He tapped one of the florist receipts, enlarging it. Handwriting scrawled across the order. For Claire, my only sister. His breath caught. The name pressed like ice against his chest. Margaret, Claire's older sister. A flood of memory rose uninvited. Margaret at the wedding, lips pressed tight as she whispered, "You stole her from us." Margaret at the funeral, voice trembling with fury, "You buried her with your job. You don't deserve that child." He had written it off as grief. Now he realized grief had calcified into something sharper. He rose, phone pocketed, and called Mason as he stepped into the quieter corridor. "I have a lead," he said flatly. "Go." Receipts tied to a florist in Hawthorne. Note signed Margaret, Claire's sister. She's been paying Elena, feeding her the script. A pause. Mason's tone hardened. "That fits the chatter we intercepted. This is personal, Daniel. Deeply personal." "I know." He pinched the bridge of his nose, forcing calm. "I'll confirm in person. Be careful. Family vendettas don't follow rules." He ended the call and returned to Lily's room. She was awake now, coloring quietly with Mrs. Turner, who had come by early before class. Lily's small hand clutched a crayon too tightly, the lines jagged across the page. "Daddy," she said softly, eyes lifting, "will you stay this time?" The question hit harder than any bullet. He crouched, smoothing a curl back from her forehead. "Yes," he said simply. "I'm not going anywhere." Behind him, Elena stood by the window, shoulders tense. Her eyes flicked toward the blanket wrapped around Lily, then back to Daniel. For a moment, guilt and fear warred across her face. He straightened, meeting her gaze. "We need to talk." They stepped into the hallway. The hum of machines faded behind the closed door. Elena crossed her arms, chin lifted. "What did you find?" "Your leash," Daniel said. He pulled the burner from his pocket, thumb brushing the florist receipt. "Margaret, she's been pulling your strings." Elena flinched, just barely. "You don't understand." "Then explain it to me." Her eyes glossed. She said if I didn't follow, she'd expose everything. My visa, my loans, things you don't even know. She said she'd take Lily away and prove I was unfit. I was terrified. And so you shoved her into a desk. His voice was low, dangerous. Elena's throat worked. I made a mistake. A terrible one. But Margaret made me believe it was the only way. She wanted Lily to hate you. Daniel stared at her, chest heavy. Margaret. Of course it was Margaret. The bitterness in her words at Claire's funeral hadn't been grief. It had been the start of a war. He leaned closer, voice barely above a whisper. You had a choice. You chose wrong. But Margaret lit the fire. And I'm going to put it out. Elena's lips parted, as though she might argue, but no words came. She turned away, pressing her palm flat against the wall. If you go after her, she'll ruin us both. She already tried, he said. Now it's my turn. He walked back into Lily's room, pulling the yellow blanket higher over her small frame. She looked up at him, eyes tired but steady. Daddy. Yes, Bug. Her voice was barely a whisper. Don't let her come back. He swallowed hard. I won't. As Lily drifted back to sleep, Daniel pulled a notepad from the bedside drawer. He wrote down 3 addresses: the florist, the tutoring center, the P.O. box. All roads led back to Margaret. The first step would be Hawthorne. The fight had shifted. It wasn't about Elena anymore. It wasn't even about the shove. It was about the hand behind the curtain. The one rewriting Lily's memories. The one turning Claire's death into a weapon. And Daniel knew this wasn't just about proving innocence. It was about survival. The library in Hawthorne was quiet enough to hear the clock tick. Daniel sat in a glass-walled study room, the burner phone resting on the table between his hands. Beyond the glass, students bent over laptops. A mother hushed her toddler. Everything looked ordinary, which made the air feel sharper. At 10:03, Margaret arrived. She wore a navy coat, her hair pulled back severely, the same sharp cheekbones he remembered from Claire's family photographs. Age had carved lines deeper into her face, but the eyes were unchanged, piercing, assessing, holding judgment like a weapon. She entered without hesitation, sliding into the chair opposite him. You've been busy, she said, nodding at the phone. Daniel studied her calmly. You left a trail? Sloppy. Her lips twitched. Sloppy? Or intentional? Maybe I wanted you to find me. He tilted his head slightly. Then why hide behind Elena? Because she's easy, Margaret said flatly. Fragile. Afraid. She just needed the right push, and she gave Lily the shove you wouldn't. His fists clenched under the table. You coached her. Fed her lines. You made her call Claire weak. Margaret's eyes glistened, but there was no warmth in it. Claire was weak. She let you consume her life, and then you weren't even there when she died. You broke her. You broke all of us. Daniel's chest tightened. Cancer took Claire, not me. Margaret leaned forward, her voice low, venom wrapped in grief. You stole her from her family. You dragged her into your shadow world, left her alone when she needed you most. And then you expected us to honor you as the grieving husband. No, you don't deserve Lily. She deserves to know what you are, a ghost, a coward. For a moment, Daniel said nothing. He watched her, every muscle in his body urging him to lash out, but years of training steadied him. So you decided to make her bleed to prove your point? I didn't touch her, Margaret snapped. But yes, I wanted her to see you for what you are. Elena was a tool. She needed leverage. I gave it to her. And when Lily told the teacher what happened, I smiled because finally the truth was spilling out. Daniel leaned back, his voice measured steel. The truth? Or your version of it? Margaret's eyes hardened. Call what you want. I call it justice. He slid the phone across the table. You call this justice? Make her hate him. Call Claire weak. Those aren't words of grief. They're commands. You turned your niece into a pawn. For the first time, Margaret faltered. Her fingers flexed against the table, nails clicking softly on the surface. She needs to know what kind of man you are. She knows, Daniel said quietly. She knows I'm here when it matters. He leaned closer, eyes locked on hers. And she'll know you try to take her childhood away to feed your bitterness. Margaret exhaled, shaking now, her composure thinning. You think authorities will believe you? That little phone won't hold up. Elena will never fully confess. It'll be your word against mine. Daniel's jaw set. I don't need them to believe me. I need them to believe Lily. And every bruise you scripted is already written on her medical report. Silence pressed between them. Outside, a student laughed, muffled through glass. Inside, the weight of years of resentment hung heavy. Margaret finally stood, slipping her coat tighter around her. You can't erase me, Daniel. I am her blood. And blood remembers. He didn't move, didn't break her gaze. Blood also betrays. She left without another word, heels clicking down the hall until the sound faded. Daniel sat back, letting the tension drain slowly from his shoulders. He had the confession, not recorded, but burned into memory and strengthened by the messages, the receipts, the threats. It wasn't a clean victory, but it was leverage, enough to protect Lily. He picked up the burner, slipped it back into his pocket, and stood. The war with Margaret wasn't over, but it had shifted. She was no longer a shadow. She was exposed, cornered. And once someone was exposed, they always made mistakes. As Daniel stepped out into the crisp hawthorn air, the sky overhead was streaked with gray, the kind that threatened rain. He pulled his coat tighter. The next move belonged to him, but the battlefield had changed. This wasn't about secrecy or strategy anymore. It was about family, and he would fight for it with every weapon he had. Rain streaked down the windshield as Daniel sat in the hospital parking lot, engine idling. Margaret's words replayed in his head like a toxin he couldn't shake. She was weak. You broke her. You don't deserve Lily. Every syllable dripped with grief, turned into poison. But her slip in the library had given him what he needed. She had admitted to coaching Elena, admitted to scripting Lily's suffering. Daniel pulled the burner from his pocket, scrolling back through the threads. Messages lined up like ammunition. He hit record on his phone and read them aloud, each line captured with his steady voice. It wasn't enough to prove everything in court, but combined with Margaret's confrontation and Elena's inevitable collapse, it would paint a picture no one could ignore. Inside pediatrics, Lily was awake, crayons scattered across her tray table. She looked up when he entered, her eyes carrying both hope and fear. Did you find out? She asked softly. I did, Daniel said, sitting beside her. And I'll make sure she never hurts you again. Elena stood at the window, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the rain beyond. She hadn't spoken much since their hallway confrontation. When Daniel placed the burner on the counter, she flinched. You're not the only one she trapped, he said quietly. I met her. Margaret. She told me everything. Elena turned, eyes wide. You confronted her. She's not hiding anymore. She wanted me to know, but she underestimated what that means. Elena's hands trembled as she pressed them together. You don't understand. She promised. If I didn't follow, she'd expose my past. The loans, the visa extension, everything. She said I'd lose Lily, that you'd hate me. Daniel's gaze was hard, but not cruel. You let fear decide, and Lily paid the price. Elena's lips quivered. I thought if I just followed, it would stop. But it never did. It kept getting worse. Before Daniel could respond, the door opened. Sandra Green from CPS entered, accompanied by a detective in a gray suit. His badge flashed as he introduced himself. Detective Alvarez, Family Crimes Unit. Mr. Cole, Mrs. Cole, we've reviewed the report, and we need to speak with both of you. Daniel gestured to the burner. That phone contains messages directing Elena to harm my daughter emotionally and physically. They came from Margaret Hale, Claire's sister. Alvarez's brow furrowed as he slipped on gloves and picked up the phone. We'll have digital forensics confirm. And you're saying you met this Margaret? I did. She admitted enough to connect the dots. She's been orchestrating this. Elena sagged against the wall, whispering, she'll come for me now. Sandra stepped forward, her voice firm but gentle. Elena, if you cooperate, we can protect you. But if you withhold, you'll face charges alone. Tears welled in Elena's eyes. She looked at Lily, small, fragile, clinging to her rabbit, and something inside her broke. It was Margaret. She told me to push her, to use Claire's memory. She said it would prove Daniel was unfit. I'm so sorry. The confession hung heavy in the sterile air. Lily buried her face in the blanket, trembling. Alvarez's jaw tightened. That's enough for a warrant. We'll pick Margaret up. He closed the evidence bag around the phone and tucked it under his arm. Daniel exhaled, tension leaving him in fragments. He reached for Lily, who clung to him fiercely. "You're safe," he murmured. "I promise." As Alvarez and Sandra left, Elena crumpled into the chair by the window, shoulders shaking. For the first time, she looked small, her elegance stripped to raw regret. "I never wanted this," she whispered. Daniel didn't answer. He simply held Lily closer, his mind already on the next step. Margaret thought she was untouchable, that her grief gave her license to destroy. But now the system was moving against her. Outside, thunder rolled low and steady. The storm had broken, but the real reckoning was only beginning. The precinct's fluorescent lights hummed faintly as Detective Alvarez led Margaret into an interview room. Her navy coat was still immaculate, though her wrists were cuffed in front of her. She walked with her chin raised, eyes sharp, as if daring anyone to say she didn't belong there. Daniel sat behind the one-way glass, arms folded, watching every flicker of her face. Inside the room, Alvarez dropped a file on the table and slid the burner phone across. "Recognize this?" Margaret's eyes flicked down, then back up. A cheap toy. Hardly proof of anything. Alvarez remained calm. "Funny, because the messages match statements made by your sister's daughter, your niece. Call her mother weak. Push, don't break. We've got Elena's confession, and she puts you squarely in the middle." Margaret's lips curled in a faint smile. Of course she did. She'd say anything to save herself. From behind the glass, Daniel's jaw clenched. He wanted to storm the room, to demand she look him in the eye while explaining why Lily had blood on her face because of her schemes. But Mason's words echoed in his memory. "Fix it, don't break it." He stayed still. Alvarez leaned closer across the table. "You manipulated a grieving child, Ms. Hale. That's not just cruel, it's a crime. Endangerment, coercion, conspiracy. We have enough to hold you." Margaret's composure cracked, just for a second. Her hands trembled where they rested on the steel table. She deserved to know the truth, she spat. Claire deserved better than him. He left her to die alone while he played soldier overseas. And now he parades himself as the perfect father? No, I won't let him write the story. Her words pierced the glass like shards. Daniel's breath caught, but he forced himself not to move. Alvarez's voice cut through the tension. "This isn't about him. This is about a child with a head injury. A child you deliberately tried to turn against her father. That ends today." Margaret laughed bitterly, a hollow sound. "You think locking me up will erase the truth? Lily will grow. She'll remember who abandoned her. And when she does, she'll hate him without my help." Alvarez closed the file. "We'll let the court decide what she remembers. For now, you're under arrest." He stood, motioning to the officer by the door. As Margaret was led out, her gaze flicked to the glass. For the first time, she looked directly where Daniel sat. Their eyes met through the barrier, her stare burning with defiance. Then she was gone. Daniel exhaled, shoulders heavy. The satisfaction was hollow. Margaret was in custody, but the damage she had done, Lily's wound, Elena's betrayal, the poisoned words about Claire, those wouldn't vanish with a pair of handcuffs. Back at the hospital, Lily sat up in bed, coloring quietly. She looked smaller than her 10 years, fragile in a way that shredded Daniel's heart. When he walked in, she looked up with cautious hope. "Is it over?" Daniel knelt by her side, brushing her hair gently from her face. "She can't hurt you anymore. That part is over." Tears welled in her eyes. "But why did Aunt Margaret hate you?" He hesitated, searching for words a child could carry. "She loved your mom so much that when she lost her, she looked for someone to blame. She chose me. But that's not your burden to carry, Lily. It's mine." Lily sniffled, pressing her rabbit against her chest. "I don't want to hate anyone." His throat tightened. "You don't have to. You just have to know you're safe and that your mom was never weak. She was the bravest person I ever knew." Across the room, Elena stood quietly, arms wrapped around herself. Her eyes were swollen from hours of crying. When Daniel looked at her, she lowered her gaze. "I told them everything," she whispered. "About Margaret. About me. I'll face whatever comes." Daniel studied her, torn between anger and pity. That's the least you can do. She nodded, voice trembling. I know. Lily reached for his hand, pulling him back to the bedside. Stay tonight, Dad? He squeezed her hand gently. I'm not leaving. As the ward lights dimmed, Daniel sat with Lily tucked against his arm, her breathing slowing into the rhythm of sleep. Outside the window, the city moved on, indifferent. But inside, the war was shifting to its final battle. Margaret was in custody. Elena's mask had shattered, and Daniel had one last duty, to rebuild trust in the ruins left behind. And this time, he wouldn't walk away. The hospital discharged Lily 2 days later. Her stitches were clean, the dizziness gone, though Daniel could still see the faint bruise shadowing her temple. He carried her overnight bag in one hand and held her small fingers in the other as they walked through the automatic doors into sunlight. The world outside looked the same. Cars honking, a bus pulling up to the curb. But for Daniel, everything had shifted. At home, the walls no longer felt like protection. The living room's neat perfection, once Elena's pride, now seemed sterile, built to hide rot beneath the surface. Lily hesitated in the doorway, clutching her rabbit. Daniel bent low, voice steady. It's still our home, Bug. We'll make it safe again. She nodded, trusting him in a way that tightened his chest. Elena stood in the hall, suitcase at her feet. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the strap. The court gave me supervised visitation. I'll leave keys with Sandra. I don't expect forgiveness. Her voice cracked, but she held his gaze. Daniel studied her. There was no triumph in him, only a weary acceptance. Lily needs honesty, not performance. If you can give her that, maybe one day she'll let you back in. Elena's eyes shone with tears. She nodded once, picked up her suitcase, and walked out. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving silence in its wake. That evening, Mason arrived unannounced. He leaned against the doorway, suit immaculate, eyes sharp. Margaret's in holding. She'll face conspiracy and endangerment charges. With Elena's statement, the case is solid. You could return to Berlin if you wanted. Daniel shook his head. He was in the kitchen, stirring soup on the stove while Lily colored at the table. I'm done running operations. The only mission left is here. Mason's expression barely shifted, but a flicker of understanding passed through his eyes. You're sure? Daniel glanced at Lily, who hummed softly as she filled in a page with uneven strokes of green. Absolutely. Mason nodded once, then stepped back into the night. The door closed with a quiet finality. Over the next weeks, life reshaped itself. Mornings meant walking Lily to school, her hand warm in his. Afternoons were homework at the kitchen table, Daniel learning patience with fractions and misspelled words. Evenings brought laughter creeping back in, hesitant at first, then freer, until the house felt alive again. But some nights, Lily would wake crying, whispering. She said Mom was weak. Daniel would sit on the edge of her bed, brushing her hair gently, voice steady. Your mom was never weak. She was stronger than anyone I've ever met. Slowly, those whispers eased. When Margaret's trial came, Daniel testified. He spoke clearly about the messages, the manipulation, the damage done. Margaret sat at the defense table, her chin raised, but the fire in her eyes had dimmed. Her words no longer carried the same venom. They were brittle now, the fury of someone who had already lost. The judge's ruling was swift, guilty. Sentenced, restrained, her power was gone. Afterward, Daniel walked Lily out of the courthouse. She looked up at him, small hand gripping his tightly. Is it over now? He bent to her level, meeting her eyes. Yes, it's over. She nodded, relief loosening her shoulders, and smiled for the first time in weeks. A real smile, unburdened. That night, Daniel placed a photo of Claire back on Lily's dresser. The frame caught the lamplight, her face glowing softly in the dim room. Lily touched the glass and whispered, "Good night, Mom." Daniel stood in the doorway, the weight of promises heavy on his chest. Claire's voice echoed from memory. Protect her no matter what. He had failed in pieces, stumbled through absence and betrayal. But now he was here. He closed the door gently, the sound of Lily's breathing steady in the quiet. For the first time in years, He felt like he wasn't leaving something unfinished behind. The world outside could burn, missions could wait, but inside this house he had chosen his war. And he had won.